Okay, well, hello everybody. This is the first video that I am putting together for the course where we'll be talking about Ivy Day in the committee room. So I want to start off by hope everyone's coping reasonably well with our new reality. Um, Let me briefly explain how I'm trying to proceed with this new online platform. You will have noticed that I have posted PowerPoints on Omnivox for Ivy Day in the committee room. We're going to take a look at them. I can access them, I'm pretty sure, as we talk about it. So I may be coming to these PowerPoints, but you have access to them. We will reference them as we are discussing the story. But I'll be also, as you can see here, I have the story up on my screen as well in a Word document, which allows me to do some highlighting and so on. And of course, you have the camera here so you can see me. So while we'll be talking about the themes and characters and so on, what I'm hoping to be able to do is to continue what we do in class to some extent by engaging in close reading of the text itself. So these videos will be approximately, I'm going to try and keep them to about 10-15 minutes each, which obviously I'll be posting more than one. I have to get a feel for this. This is brand new to me. This is challenging. As you know, I don't teach with PowerPoint, so just putting the PowerPoints together was itself a challenge. But we're going to see how it goes, and we'll modify things as we proceed. Once I get the feedback from you, you'll see from the notice that I sent you as well that I am working with the TAV technicians on arranging so that we can do some kind of video chat, either through Google Meet, I think it's called, where we'll have a set time where I'll be available online so that you can all join and we can all be online together at the same time and engage in discussion of the text, which is, of course, what the closest thing we can get to having a classroom atmosphere and a classroom type of working environment. So we're going to see how this goes. You'll know as well from the notice that I sent to you on Omnivox that the midterm in any case will be a take-home exam. So I will give you the dates for that once I get a clearer picture of how this is all unfolding. You'll have at least 2 weeks from the time that I post the question to write the essay and send it to me. What we'll be doing with the final exam is, well, let's wait and see if we are, in fact, going to be coming back to classes on May 1st. So we'll make decisions about that later on. For the in-class assignments, I'm working on how to do that. There'll be some sort of quizzes that you'll take online, again, if we're not coming back to classes. And I will give you all the details to that as we proceed. All right, and I'll be sending more information to really outline exactly how we're going to proceed once I see how things go and how you guys are responding to this new platform. All right, so for now, I want to start off by discussing the text. I hope you've all read it. If you haven't, you can pause this video, finish reading it, and then watch the video and the ensuing videos that will be talking about Ivy Day in the committee room as well. We will be following the course syllabus. So we're going to spend these first few videos, I don't know how many yet, 2, 3, however it may be. We'll be dealing with Ivy Day in the committee room, and then we'll be moving in accordance with the course outline. All right, we will be able to make up the time, at least as things stand now, because we had set aside 1 week where you're going to have your midterm exam and a week for the final exam. If those are going to be take-home exams, well, we have 2 extra weeks to do whatever this materializes to be. Okay, again, be patient, and let's see how this goes, and I'll make modifications to these videos and to the PowerPoints and any other documents that I send you as I get, again, a better feel for how this is all going to unfold. So for now, let's look at the text, okay? So Ivy Day in the Committee Room, that's James Joyce. This is one of the stories in his collection of short stories called Dubliners. Well, again, you should have read it before you start watching this video. So I would imagine that some of the concerns can reside in the political nature of this particular story. It is very political. It is talking about actual political characters and political events that are very much related to the Irish situation towards the turn of the 20th century, early 1900s. We will talk a little bit about Parnell, all right, the politician. He's mentioned here, and you've seen that in the PowerPoint as well. But I don't want you to be concerned about if you don't know much about Irish history, or you've never heard of Charles Parnell. The way I'm approaching this short story is you don't need to in order to continue what we've already been doing in terms of how we approach the reading of these texts, of these short stories, right? So we're still going to be looking for the same things. We're going to be looking for the themes. We're going to be assessing the tone. We're going to be unpacking what is actually unfolding. And we're going to be looking at the character development, the interaction among the characters, and try to get an understanding of what's actually going on here. And as we've discussed in class many times, the layers of possible meaning. So while this can be read very politically, and you can delve deep into the Irish history, political history involving Parnell, this can, and I think more profoundly, be read just as a short story in and onto itself, where we get a sense of the underlying theme of the inertia and the isolation and the lack of will and the lack of drive in these characters, and how that manifests not just politically but as well as socially, and socially in terms of different generations and how they interact, and what this says about a community that lacks leadership, lacks purpose, lacks a drive to achieve, and how this spills over and influences every element of that society to a large extent. Okay, those are that's a very general, basic, foundational idea of what's going on in this story. But let's look at it closely, and let's start unpacking it and seeing what is revealed as we do so. So where do we start? Well, where we always start, with the title. So it's Ivy Day in the Committee Room. Now, of course, again, this new platform, I would be waiting for you guys to respond to that and tell me what you make of that. But I'm going to have to do more lecturing here, so I will, unpack it and give you suggestions as to ways in which you can interpret everything from the title to the text itself and the characters. So with Ivy Day in the Committee Room, well, we can see a committee room being the obvious, literally a committee room. The Ivy Day, now what's that? Okay, well, we find out as we read that Ivy Day is, to some extent, quite recognizable in Ireland, in any case, as a commemorative day, October 6th, which is the day that Parnell died. And we'll notice this when you're reading through here, and we'll come to it quite shortly, when they're wearing these pins, all right, with the ivy. And that is in reference to Parnell, and to this day, because the story takes place on that day, on October 6th, which is Ivy Day. Again, very recognizable in Ireland, less so outside. So, Ivy Day in the committee room. So, when we begin, first character we encounter, Old Jack. And again, you can reference this over to the PowerPoint, right? Where we have Old Jack is the first one here. These are very rough notes concerning every character, but they're there to help guide you, all right, in accompany with the close reading that we're going to do as we go through. But again, you can constantly come back to this character list and the theme list that were in the PowerPoints that I posted for you. So to begin, let's look at the beginnings. Remember, when we're looking at the beginning of a story, it is setting a tone. It is laying a foundation for what comes. We take it in sequence so that the um, situation that evolves is better understood once we have the foundation laid in these opening paragraphs. Again, it's very specific, very, very much so when we're talking about a short story because of its short length. So things happen fast, but we look for specific elements that relate to the tone, the mood, if you will, and the introduction of characters and themes. So what are we getting here as we read the first little bit of Ivy Day in the committee room? Well, old Jack raked the cinders together with a piece of cardboard and spread them judiciously over the whitening dome of coals. When the dome was thinly covered, and here you'll see that I've already started highlighting things, and we're going to highlight. I stopped highlighting because I want to highlight with you the passages that we're going to do a close reading with. We're not going to be able to read the whole story, so I'm going to pick certain passages and really unpack them for you so that you can engage in that same kind of reading, critical reading, when you look it over again, when you reread it, prepare for your midterm, etc. So when the dome was thinly covered, his face lapsed into darkness, right? So what we take note of there is the darkness, all right? Darkness representing, as we discussed in the past, a lack of vision, a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding of something. We don't know at this point, right? We're just accumulating these symbols and these elements of the story to give us a sense of where we're going. So his face lapsed into darkness, but as he set himself to fan the fire again, his crouching shadow ascended the opposite wall, and his face slowly reemerged into light. So again, reminding you of how I proceed. Remember how detailed I am. We have a lot going on right there and then. The darkness and slowly emerging the fire from his crouching again, and this is all right. Shadow ascended the opposite wall, and his face slowly reemerged into the light. So it's suggesting that Jack, and in anticipation, the characters and the setting and the action that's going to be evolving here is in darkness, in shadow. But there is a suggestion here when we see slowly re-emerging into the light that there's something's going to be revealed. We're going from shadow and darkness, moving towards light. But of course, key to this is slowly. All right. Yes, we're talking specifically about old Jack and the shadows reflecting from the fire and so on in this passage, but it alerts us to look. It tells us to be attentive to this type of unveiling that may be and should be, we would anticipate, coming up as we continue reading. Okay, the moist blue eyes blinked at the fire, and the moist mouth fell open at times. I've told you a number of times, always be attentive to eyes. So we have here moist blue eyes, and moist is an interesting word, and it's also the moist mouth. What that suggests? Well, we'll have to see. We take note of it and try to see how that might fit into things that are coming down the road. But it is an interesting choice of word there in terms of moist. The moist would suggest what? He's been crying, or how does that fit in with the moist mouth? Don't know necessarily, but we want to take note of it. Okay? Fell open at times his mouth, moist mouth fell open, time munching once or twice mechanically when it is closed. I think this is really emphasizing what we need to keep in mind as well. The first character we're meeting, right, is old Jack. Okay, so if we're seeing old Jack, and when we jump down here to the mouth munching once or twice mechanically when it was closed, a characteristic of people who are elderly. But we're starting with um, an old character. So we're thinking of generations here, and you want to be attentive to the different generations, because this story very much is talking about how the older generation is responding to the political and social realities of Ireland at this time, in particular relation to Charles Parnell. In contrast with, and we're going to see that coming up when they have their discussion about the son, with the younger generation. One of the things to keep in mind here is for that older generation, old Jack and some of the other characters that we'll meet, they were very much a part of the Parnell experience. And again, if you, let me come down to the Charles Parnell, right, and you'll see I'm a little more extensive here in the PowerPoint. You can read through this yourself, but what you want to remember about Charles Parnell and the Irish situation. Ireland was um, uh, looking for independence from England. Okay, you see the time frame. This is in the late 1800s, and it was a huge thing. Ultimately, led to the Irish Revolt, Revolution, and ultimately independence in the 1920s. But Parnell was a massive figure. He was worshipped within the Irish community. One of those leaders that galvanized a country, a society, and a movement. The movement towards independence. Right? We're going to come back to Parnell. I want to get back to the story, but you do need to know that to understand. Big part of what this story is talking about is how the older generation, the generation that knew Parnell, is coping with Parnell's loss, and how the lack of a Charles Parnell, there's no one has come to replace him, affects the political and social attitudes of a younger generation. Okay, so we're going through here with meeting old Jack, and we're introduced to Mr. O'Connor, um, and one of the first things we notice, right? He says that's better now, Mr. O'Connor, and Mr. O'Connor, a gray-haired young man. Okay, so we don't usually associate gray hair with young men. And that's very telling, right? So this Mr. O'Connor seems to be straddling, right, just by this description, gray-haired young man, that he represents the younger generation, but he's also got a foot, if you will, into the world of the older generation in some way, because he's gray-haired. We don't know in what way at this point, but it's something to take note of, particularly with Mr. O'Connor. Okay, face was disfigured, many blotches and pimples. Again, something we associate more with younger. Um, had just bought the tobacco for cigarette in shapely cylinders, but when spoken to, he undid his handiwork meditatively. Then he began to roll the tobacco again. So it's showing, again, you want to envision this, rolling the cigarette, undoing it, doing it again. There seems to be a lethargy here, a lack of urgency, obviously, but a very laid back attitude, if you will. Okay. Um, and after a moment's thought, decided to lick the paper. Um, did Mr. Tierney say when he'd be back? He asked in a husky falsetto. So we're introduced here to a Mr. Tierney. And again, if you go to your PowerPoint, you'll see that Mr. Tierney, all right, we'll look at it together. Richard Tierney, he's the politician. Okay, the people we're meeting in this committee room are canvassers. They're people who are going out and promoting Richard Tierney as the politician. He's a career politician, as the person who they are advocating for, trying to solicit votes for. Right, so we see he's a politician. We're going to find out that they're canvassers for him. But the first thing, here's where we're introduced to him by Mr. O'Connor. And when is he going to be back? So there's a sense of waiting here, right? So Mr. O'Connor is here with old Jack, and they're waiting for this politician. Mr. O'Connor put his cigarette into his mouth, began to search his pockets. He took out a pack of thin pasteboard cards. I'll get you a match, says the old man, to light a cigarette, right? He's been rolling a cigarette. Now he needs it to be lit. Mr. O'Connor, so for old Jack is saying, I'll go get you a match. And Mr. O'Connor's response is, never mind, this'll do. Well, what will do? Well, he selects one of the cards and read what was printed on it. These are a pack of pasteboard cards, right? They're like calling cards, okay? Business cards. He selected one of the cards, and what do we see? It was printed on it: municipal elections, Royal Exchange Ward, and there's Mr. Richard Tierney. Solicits the favor of your vote and influence coming election. So Mr. O'Connor has these cards. We find out that Mr. O'Connor is one of the canvassers. So he has these cards. He's knocking on doors. He's saying, please vote for Tierney. Usually one associates someone who is advocating for a political party or political figure as someone who's enthusiastically in supporting this person, and believes in him, and so on, right? And of course, that's what is very much being played on here. So he takes out the cards, and we find out here Mr. O'Connor been engaged. Tierney is an agent to canvass one part of the ward, right? So he is someone who is going out trying to solicit votes for Tierney. But what do we find out here? He spent a great part of the day sitting by the fire of the committee room. So he hasn't been out there, right? The weather it's bad weather outside. So he's decided to basically, and we get that sense by the way he's rolling the cigarette, then stops rolling, then re-rolls it. He's been sitting there probably all day. His excuse, well, it's raining. It's bad weather out there. So which demonstrates or shows us there's not much enthusiasm here for what he's doing for Tierney. He's been there with Jack, the old caretaker, who we've met. And notably here, it is the 6th of October. Now, again, without the background information, what is the 6th of October? Who's going to make that association of the 6th of October with Ivy Day? Well, people in Ireland would. We're not in Ireland, and we don't necessarily know much about Irish history. But that will unfold and be revealed. But here it tells us, once we have doing what we're doing, that indeed this is Ivy Day in the committee room. And Ivy Day is the 6th of October, which again commemorates the day that Parnell died. Okay? So again, just this little paragraph here, we're getting a chunk of information. We're told where we are, what's the date, and we're getting a sense from Mr. O'Connor, who is a canvasser for a politician named Tierney, and that he has spent the great part of the day just sitting in the committee room instead of being out there canvassing for his politician. And to further this understanding of Mr. O'Connor and his relationship with his, well, to a large extent, his boss, the politician Tierney, he takes this card, which he just pulled out of his pocket, the card that he'd be handing out in his canvassing, and he tears off a strip of the card and lit a cigarette. So what's that telling us? It doesn't seem to really have enthusiasm or even care for tyranny or for his job. He's taking these cards that he's going to be handing out to try to get people to vote for his for Tierney, the politician. He rips it and uses it like a match. Okay, it tells us about Mr. O'Connor. It also sets the mood. This whole opening sequence is giving us a sense of this lethargy, this shadowy little bit of light opening up, but there's a tone and an atmosphere and a mood of shadow and light, not much clarity, and this I don't know if we call it laziness on the part of O'Connor, but there's something about his character here, the fact that he's ripping up these cards that he needs to be distributing to light a cigarette that took him seemingly much longer than necessary to roll. It's creating this atmosphere, okay, and this mood, and introducing us to the politics, the 6th of October, Ivy Day, and setting again the tone for what's going to come. So what you want to keep in mind here in this opening, this opening sequence, is this tone that's being created. The generations, right? We see old, right? It's old Jack, right? Let's go back up. It's old Jack, and then it's Mr. O'Connor, who's a young man, but a gray-haired young man. Okay, so we're going to have some conflict, and the next section that we're going to look at will really emphasize that, right? If we quickly, I want to go through this, quickly, because I want to again keep these videos relatively short. Otherwise, it just drones on, and then I'll just post another one, and we'll build from there. But we're going to have this whole sequence that follows after he lights the cigarette. Toward a piece of cardboard and began to fan the fire slowly while his companion smoked. Okay. Yes, he said, continuing. It's hard to know what way to bring up children, right? So this is now we're seeing a conversation, other than just asking where's Tierney, because I'm waiting for him. But now we're getting the opening discussion between the two characters who we have here now, and it's about how to, as it says here, bring up children. Again, emphasizing generation gap, and the different way that the two generations, old and young, are going to be dealing with this political / social event that is an election. And he's talking about, right, you think he'd turn out like that? I sent him to the Christian Brothers. Important, right? Introducing the concept of Christianity. It is important to note that in Ireland at the time of this story, and still today, the Catholic Church is a huge force in society and politics, or had been in any case. And this speaks back to Parnell, which I'm going to want to talk more about Parnell in the next video, okay? But sent him to the Christian Brothers as a school, or many Irish children were taught in Catholic-run institutions. But he's not just saying I sent him to the Christian body. He's saying in the context that look what I did for him. Okay. By the way, we do have to jump back here. Sorry, jumping around a bit. When he lights his cigarette, as he did, the flame lit up a leaf of dark, glossy ivy in the lapel of his coat. Okay, this is a commemorative pin that is related to the 6th of October, Parnell's death. Okay, and we want to keep an eye out for this. This is a very important symbol. Okay, here the ivy in the lapel of his coat, whether it's actually a pin or a piece of ivy, a little unclear, but we'll see when they discuss it more. It'll become clearer as we go. But by wearing that, he's acknowledging, right, his affiliation with Parnell, or at least in terms of celebrating this day, Ivy Day, as a commemoration for Parnell. The thing to keep in mind at this point, okay, is Parnell is everywhere here. All right, it really is a story. Yes, there are specifics about this particular election and the politician tyranny, but this story is first and foremost about how Irish society at this time was still reacting to the loss of Parnell, and how the different generations, were responding to the loss of this leader. And what we'll discuss in the next video is how Parnell um, no longer became a political force, because it's not just that he died. All right, and there's a scandal, a very important scandal, which again, I don't think I touched on too much here in the PowerPoint. But you'll see here, the Catholic Church pushed him out of politics for having an extramarital affair. We're going to have to talk about that, because it wasn't just that he died. Before he died, he was usurped. He was humiliated, and he was driven out of the party. And again, this was tremendously popular, an important politician at the time. So briefly, just to wrap up this segment, when he goes up here, done with what I could for him, and there he goes boozing about. I tried to make him somewhat decent, some way decent. So he's talking about his son, and having, suggesting that his son, he tried to do everything for his son, but tried to make him some way decent. But the problem seems to be that despite everything, according to this, um, this narrative that's being given to us, right? Um, did whatever I could for him, but he is out boozing. Okay, and it's important to remember this is an introduction of alcohol. This is a big part of this story, insofar as the characters, as we'll see as we get towards the end, the desire to drink, but to drink perhaps for the wrong reasons, as an escape, and how that drinking contributes to a lack of movement, a lack of will, a lack of enthusiasm, and so on. And it becomes, again, a major theme of sorts in the story, in terms of the drinking. He goes on, only I'm an old man now. I'd change his tune for him. I'd take the stick to his back and beat him while I could stand over him, as I'd done many a time before. The mother, she cocks him up with this and that. And we have here Mr. O'Connor finally responding, that's what ruins children. Now, this is an important piece here, again, when we're talking about the two generations. The old Jack is talking about, if I could, I'd take the stick to his back and beat him while I could stand over him, as I'd done many times before. So it didn't seem to work before. Why would you do it again? So there's a little bit of a lack of understanding here, and frustration at his son, who's out boozing. And then a quick switch. The mother, she, in so many words, she's responsible. And then, Mr. O'Connor's, that's what ruins children. To be sure it is, said the old man, and little thanks you get for it, only impudence. He takes the upper hand of me whenever he sees me. I've a sup taken. What's the world coming to when sons speaks that way to their father? Okay, so what is that suggesting? The son is not very respectful to the father, and the father is saying, what's the world coming to if a son is disrespectful to the father? Well, of course, respect has to be earned. And this speaks to not just this very particular father-son relationship, but it also is going to be speaking to this role that Parnell had in terms of how he was worshipped, and played a bit of a father figure for Ireland. Okay, and this is a suggestion of, when we talk more about Parnell in the next video, this is a suggestive of how people reacted when Parnell did something that was considered immoral and unethical. and who turned on him, who continued to support him, and who turned on him, and how that relationship, father-son, in this case, what we're reading here, a very literal father-son relationship, but a more metaphorical type of father-son relationship when we look at Parnell as being the father of the movement for independence in Ireland. Okay, what age is he? So the son, the old Jack's son is 19. Why don't you put him to something? Sure, Emmett, I never done it. And again, what we're having here is the drunken Browsey ever since he left school. You must get a job for yourself, but sure, it's worse whenever he gets a job. Whenever he gets a job, he drinks it all up. So again, an emphasis now on how we have a 19-year-old, the youth, that generation, who just doesn't seem to care about things, because if they're just going out there paycheck to paycheck and just drinking it up, which is something that is particular to a number of generations in Irish history, where, and we'll see how Joyce plays on this a bit as we look on. And Mr. O'Connell shook his head, and the old man fell silent, gazing into the fire. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. Okay, but the gazing into the fire, we've noticed, again, the shadowy and the fire bringing some light to it. But be attentive to the idea of fire. And, when we look at this, Mr. O'Connor shook his head in sympathy, right? Again, remember, this is the gray-haired young man. Very interesting character in, again, that he straddles, it seems to straddle both worlds to some extent. And then someone opened the door and called out, and we're gonna stop here and come back to it. This opening here, I'm sure you remember, we've done this in class. This type of close reading. So keep it in mind, if you have a chance, especially under these new circumstances, if you have a chance to reread the story after you watch this video and the 1 or 2 videos that I'm going to continue to post later this week, hopefully tomorrow. I have to see how things go. The preparation, everything's very different now. So I'm adapting. I imagine by next week and the week after, we'll be much more on our way, and I'll have this down, have a little more clarity with how I want to proceed with this. But do try to, look at the story again, with, especially now after we've so detailed this opening and what it sets up, because I think you'll discover things if you read it again. And I'm not going to have time to do this type of close reading for the rest of this short story. We'll come back. I'm going to talk about Parnell, and I'm going to emphasize the importance of Parnell here. And then we'll look at some other passages and do, again, this type of reading related to the PowerPoints. I will try to put together some more PowerPoints. I'm not good at the PowerPoints. I'm just not good with the technology. It takes me forever just to put up like 3 or 4 slides. I will get better. I will get faster. And I will try to get more PowerPoints up there. But remember, we're continuing what we did in class, which is close reading, spotting every detail, and seeing how those details are revisited as we continue along in the story. Okay? So be attentive to all postings on Omnivox. I will send updates every chance I can, and we will see how this unfolds. Fear not, we will be finding the best way to approach this whole thing. Okay, and yes, that was one of my sons walking by. We're in very tight quarters here, so another thing. And everyone, stay safe, follow what we're supposed to do, and so on during, again, these very strange times. All right, so again, I'll be posting this, and keep your eye out for further postings and notices and documents and PowerPoints and everything else. And email me through Omnivox if you have questions or concerns of any sort. I'll do my best to answer them. And I will be working on trying to get us a time when we can have live interactions. I'm not sure how that works. Again, technology is not my thing, but they're helping me at Tab to figure it out. So hopefully we'll have something along those lines as well. Okay, then. See you next time.